There's a type of silence that sets off every alarm in your body. Not the peaceful kind. The wrong kind. The kind that feels staged. That's what I felt the moment I stepped into the Myers backyard. A woman named Joanne Myers, 38, was found dead in her kitchen in a quiet suburb of Asheville, North Carolina. Blunt force trauma. No forced entry. Nothing stolen. And here's the part that drew me in. She had a dog. A big one. An 8-year-old German shepherd named Buster. And according to her neighbors, Buster barked at everything. Mailmen. Squirrels. The wind. But that night, when someone entered the house and murdered his owner, Buster made no noise. No one heard a thing. That's why I got the call. The lead detective said it felt off. And he was right. The husband, Greg Myers, had been out of town for work. Alibi checked out. Flight logs. Hotel cameras. The usual. He'd flown home the morning after when a neighbor called him, worried that Joanne hadn't shown up to teach her yoga class. The scene was clinical. Joanne was lying on the tile floor, curled slightly, like she'd fallen while trying to get away. One blow to the back of the head with something heavy. Likely a blunt object, but nothing from the house was missing. No fingerprints. No sign of a struggle. Nothing broken. And Buster, found sitting silently beside her. Not aggressive. Not frightened. Just calm. That's not how dogs act. Especially not one trained as a guard animal. So I started there. Vet records showed Buster had been healthy. No sedatives in his system. No trauma. But his behavior that morning was subdued, like he'd seen something and made peace with it. That bothered me. I looked into Joanne's recent activity. 3 weeks before her death, she'd filed a complaint at the local station about someone being in the house while I'm gone. Drawers slightly moved. A toothbrush misplaced. She thought it might be paranoia, but it scared her enough to report it. There was no follow-up. I asked Greg about it. He shrugged, said she was imaginative. But I wasn't so sure. I went through the house again, slowly, carefully, room by room. Then I noticed it. Behind a wall-mounted bookshelf in the guest room, I found a set of old nail holes, not from the bookshelf. They were too evenly spaced, vertically aligned, like something had once been mounted there and removed. I ran a luminol sweep, faint traces of blood, small dots beneath the baseboard, too old to be from the current scene. Whatever happened in this house had started before Joanne's death. Security system logs showed nothing. No breach. No disarm code entered after 9:22 p.m., the last time Joanne was seen alive. Texting a friend. But here's the detail that cracked it. The smart thermostat. It logged motion. And between 11:04 p.m. and 11:12 p.m., there was movement in the hallway, then none. I checked the same window on the dog monitor app that tracked Buster's movements. He never barked. Not once. But he was awake. He moved from the back door to the kitchen and sat, waiting. That only happens when a dog recognizes whoever entered. This wasn't a stranger. Someone had access. Someone Buster trusted. I started looking into people with routine access to the house. Dog walkers, cleaners, maintenance workers. That's when I found Daniel Pierce. 24. Worked for a local pet service. Walked Buster twice a week for the past 6 months. No criminal record. Quiet guy. But 2 things stood out. First, he'd stopped walking Buster 3 weeks before the murder. Second, his prints were on a flashlight found in the garage. Wiped clean on the outside, but we found one partial inside the battery compartment. So I brought him in, asked simple questions. He denied everything, said he hadn't been there in weeks. But he slipped. I asked him what Joanne had been cooking the night she died. It wasn't public information. He said, I don't know, maybe pasta or something? We never said she was cooking, but we found pasta boiling when responders arrived. A detail only someone who'd been there could guess. A warrant gave us access to his phone. GPS showed nothing. He'd turned it off that night, but buried in his photo archive was a single image, blurry, taken from a low angle. It showed Buster, lying on the living room rug. Behind him, just barely visible, was Joanne, standing in the kitchen, back turned. The timestamp? 10:53 p.m. He'd taken a photo of the dog before he killed her. And Buster? He didn't bark because Daniel was someone he trusted, someone who used to bring him treats and take him for walks. But trust doesn't mean innocence. Joan had figured out that things were being moved. She'd changed her locks, but Daniel had a copy from before. He'd been inside, watching, maybe more than once. We'll never know exactly what triggered it that night, but we do know this. The silence of that dog wasn't a failure. It was a clue, a scream that never came because the monster already knew his name. I've seen my share of gruesome scenes, blood spatter that tells a story clearer than any witness, bone fragments that shout louder than confessions. But nothing gets under my skin like when something small, something innocuous, breaks the entire case wide open. This started with a body in the woods. Middle-aged man, mid-40s, found dumped behind a hunting cabin in rural Montana. Decomposed beyond easy recognition. Wildlife had done its part, but the body hadn't been there long. Maybe a week, 2 at most. No ID, no wallet, no car nearby. He had a broken wrist, fractured ribs, and trauma to the skull. Someone had wanted him dead. Local authorities chalked it up to a transient, maybe a drug deal gone wrong. But something didn't sit right with the sheriff. So they called me. I used to say bones don't lie. And this man's skeleton had a lot to say. During the initial sweep, the forensic tech bagged a molar found loose in the man's hoodie pocket. Just one. At first, everyone assumed it had fallen out post-mortem. But the moment I examined his jaw, I knew that didn't add up. All his teeth were intact. The molar in his pocket? Not his. That was the moment everything shifted. Dental records, even in remote areas, are more common than people think. We matched the victim eventually. Name was Carter Voss. Divorced. Lived alone. Worked as a land assessor. Clean record. No known enemies. So why was someone else's tooth in his hoodie? I had the lab run a DNA analysis. Female. That ruled out an accidental mix-up in handling. That tooth had been placed there, deliberately or otherwise. I went to Voss's apartment. Sparse. Quiet. Nothing really out of place. But in his trash, under coffee grounds and receipts, I found a small Ziploc bag with a pair of blue latex gloves and dry blood. Now it was starting to look like Voss wasn't just a victim. He'd done something. I had the blood on the gloves tested. It wasn't his either. Same female DNA as the tooth. So I started looking for a woman who'd gone missing in the area. Over the last year, only one stood out. Lana Reese, 29, lived 2 towns over. Vanished 8 months ago. Case went cold after 3 weeks. Her parents had given up hope. I had them bring in her dental records. That molar? Hers. And just like that, we had 2 people linked by a single tooth. Now here's where it gets stranger. Lana's case file noted she was last seen at a county fair. Witnesses said she left with a man, tall, flannel shirt, beard. No one ever got his name. We dug through phone records, credit cards, the usual. Nothing tied her to Voss. Until we checked a forgotten campground guest book. 2 signatures, scribbled just days before Lana disappeared. One said, "See Voss." The other, in different handwriting, L.R. They'd been out there together. Whatever happened between them didn't end well. My guess? Lana fought back. Got hurt. Maybe Voss panicked. Maybe it wasn't premeditated. But he kept the trophy. That molar. And 8 months later, someone made sure he never talked. I had to know who. Turns out Voss wasn't as isolated as we thought. A neighbor mentioned a woman who used to visit his place a few times last summer. Describe her as short, red hair, always wore boots. Didn't seem like a girlfriend, more like she was watching him. I pulled traffic cam footage from near the hunting cabin. Caught a blurry image of a beat-up Jeep Cherokee leaving the area the day before Voss's body was found. Plates were unreadable, but we got lucky. A gas station 30 miles south had security footage. Same Jeep, female driver, buying gloves, rope, and duct tape. The timestamp? 2 hours before the estimated time of Voss's death, we ran facial recognition. The match shocked everyone. Ellen Reese, Lana's older sister, schoolteacher, no priors, no history of violence. But what we learned next explained everything. Ellen had quietly conducted her own investigation after police gave up. She tracked Voss through old campground logs, social media scraps, receipts Lana had left behind. She figured it out. And then she waited until no one was watching, until Voss was alone, until she could look him in the eye and ask him what happened. We believe she got her answer, and then she made sure no one else ever would. She didn't just kill him. She left the tooth, not as a mistake, as a message, a breadcrumb, one final connection between her sister's last breath and her own act of vengeance. You see, the tooth that wasn't his was never supposed to be missed. It was supposed to be found. Ellen was arrested, confessed everything. No attempt to run, no tears. Just one line when they asked her why. He kept a part of her. I made sure she kept a part of him. And that was the end of it. A murder tied together by something no one noticed at first. A tiny piece of enamel that cracked the whole truth open. Not all crimes scream. Some whisper. You just have to know what to listen for. You'd be surprised how often a case starts with something that doesn't happen. A message that doesn't get delivered. A call that doesn't go through. That's what happened here. August 14th, 7:42 p.m. A woman named Monica Dillard sent a text to her sister from a vacation rental in upstate New York. It said, "Something's not right here. I'll call you from the car." The call never came. The next morning, Monica's car was still parked out front. The rental owner couldn't reach her. By 2 p.m., the police were called. Monica was found inside, alone, sitting on the edge of the bed in the master bedroom, dead. No sign of violence. No drugs or alcohol. Eyes open, phone still in her hand. And here's what made them call me. There was no cell signal in the room. Not poor signal. None. In a house where every other room had at least one bar. I know what you're thinking. Maybe she died of natural causes. And the signal issue is just coincidence. That's what they thought too. Until they pulled the data from her phone. She tried to call 911. 3 times. The calls were initiated, but dropped before they connected. Only in that bedroom. Now, Monica was 34, healthy. No history of heart issues. No toxins in her system. And the autopsy? Inconclusive. Cardiac arrest of undetermined origin. But here's the part that caught my eye. Her last known photo. Taken with her front camera at 7:39 p.m., just minutes before her final text. It showed her face and over her shoulder, a small nightstand mirror in the corner. In the mirror's reflection, a strange rectangular shadow on the wall. That shadow shouldn't have been there. When I visited the rental house, I brought a signal meter. Sure enough, the master bedroom was a dead zone. And not naturally. There were deliberate disruptions. Buried behind the drywall, behind the headboard, we found a custom-built Faraday mesh panel. Homemade. Crude, but effective. It was designed to block signals, sell Wi-Fi, even radio. So the question was, why would anyone install that in a vacation rental? I interviewed the property owner, a retired contractor named Henry Sloan. Clean record. He said he bought the house 5 years earlier and renovated himself. Had no idea about the mesh panel. But when I looked into the previous owner, I found something odd. The house used to belong to a man named Raymond Wilkes. Wilkes died in prison 3 years ago, convicted of kidnapping and false imprisonment. His victims? 2 women he'd kept in a reinforced basement room, lined with signal-blocking material to prevent them from calling for help. Sound familiar? That bedroom wasn't just a bedroom. It was a repurposed containment space. Wilkes had converted it, hidden the mesh behind fresh drywall. Sloan bought the place as is. Flipped it into a short-term rental without ever knowing what was underneath. But someone else did know. 2 weeks before Monica's death, the house was rented by a man named Thomas Griggs. Stayed one night, left no review. Paid in cash through a third-party booking site. The cleaning staff reported nothing unusual, but when I pulled the guest Wi-Fi router logs, I found something buried in the admin history. An unknown device connected during that stay, labeled Camex Delta, a hidden camera. I traced the MAC address. The device pinged twice more, once the day Monica checked in, and again the next morning, at 6:14 a.m., before police arrived. Someone had been watching her, and that someone had returned. We swept the room again and found a tiny, pinhole-sized lens inside the smoke detector, battery-powered, local storage. When we accessed the footage, it confirmed what we feared. Monica hadn't been alone. At 2:13 a.m., a figure appeared in the footage, wearing gloves, face obscured. No forced entry. No struggle. The footage was glitchy, but it looked like they injected something into her neck. Quick, silent, precise. Then they stood there, just watching, for nearly 20 minutes. Then they left. No broken locks. No alarms. And the signal blocking room ensured no one heard her call for help. We ran facial recognition on the body shape, movement patterns, even shoe tread. Nothing solid. But we found a second lens. This one on a bed frame, likely installed during Griggs' stay. He hadn't been testing the place for comfort. He'd been testing it for control. Griggs was a fake name. No ID matched it. But we got a partial fingerprint off the lens battery. Matched a man named Lewis Crane. Former communications engineer. Fired from a private defense contractor for unauthorized surveillance projects. Disappeared 2 years ago. He's still out there. And the rental? Taken offline. Gutted. Demolished. But that night still haunts me. Because Monica knew something was wrong. She felt it. Sent that final message. Tried to reach out. And no one could hear her. Because the room wasn't just quiet. It was designed to be. No signal. No exit. No trace, only silence and one unanswered call. There's a detail that rookies always overlook. The glass. Not just what's inside it, but how it was used. I've been to scenes where a single water ring told more than any witness, where the position of a coaster meant life or death. But in this case, it was the absence of something that screamed the truth. The victim was a man named Paul Redden, early 50s, found slumped over the dining table in his apartment in St. Louis, Missouri. A glass of scotch in front of him, nearly full. Nothing spilled. No sign of struggle. No forced entry. No bruises, no trauma. Peaceful. Too peaceful. Initial assumption? Heart attack. He lived alone. Divorced. No kids. Worked remote as an accountant. Pretty uneventful life. I was called in because of me couldn't pinpoint the exact cause of death. Toxicology was pending, but early blood work hinted at something off. His potassium levels were dangerously low, and there were faint traces of digitalis, a plant-based compound that can induce cardiac arrest if administered in the right dose. In other words, it looked clean, but it wasn't. I went through the apartment myself. Spotless. Everything in its place. No open windows, no footprints, no signs of entry. But on the table, beside his hand, was that scotch glass. Here's what bothered me. The drink looked untouched, but it wasn't full enough to have just been poured. And more importantly, there were no lip marks. Not on the rim. Not even faint impressions. And Paul Redden didn't drink with a straw. Think about that. He was sitting there, alone, with a poured drink that had no signs of being sipped. Yet it wasn't full either. That meant someone else had poured it. Or worse, someone had tampered with it. I took the glass in for latent prints. Only Paul's on the stem and the base. Nothing on the rim. It had been cleaned, or someone wore gloves. Now, the bottle of scotch nearby was half full and clean too, but it had fresh condensation, which meant it had been out of the cabinet recently. Then I checked the dishwasher. Empty, except for one thing. An identical glass. Washed, still slightly wet. That's when I knew. Someone had poured 2 drinks. One of them never made it to the table. I went back to Redden's digital records. Emails, texts, even food delivery receipts. 3 days prior, he'd ordered a dinner for two, steak and salmon. The salmon was untouched in the fridge, but the steak packaging was gone, so he had company. The delivery driver remembered a woman answering the door. Short, red hair, polite. Said she was visiting her uncle. Paul had no niece. I pulled phone records. One number kept showing up frequent. Late-night calls over the last 2 weeks. The number was registered to a prepaid burner, but it pinged near the same cell tower every night, just 5 blocks from Paul's place. So I canvassed the neighborhood. A neighbor in the adjacent building remembered seeing a woman visiting Paul a few times. Described her the same way. Said she always came around 7, left around 10, always wore gloves. Now we were getting somewhere. I dug deeper into Paul's past. Nothing criminal, but a civil suit popped up from 15 years ago, filed by a woman named Karen Bell. Accused Paul of financial fraud. Said he convinced her to invest in a fake startup. Took $80,000 of her retirement. The case was dropped. No proof. She lost everything. Karen Bell had one daughter. Her name was Elise. Same height, same red hair. No known address. But traffic violation in Illinois from 3 months prior gave us a DMV photo. It was her. I found surveillance footage from the building's lobby. No cameras in the hallway, but the main entrance caught her coming the night Paul died. 8:47 p.m., wearing gloves, carrying a small bag. She left at 10:03. No signs of distress. Calm, collected. I believe she poured 2 drinks. Sat with him, talked, maybe even smiled. Then switched the glasses, left one with the poison, took the other for herself, and put it in the dishwasher before she left. She cleaned up, wiped the rim, made sure there were no lip prints. No evidence of her presence, except for what she didn't leave behind. That's what got her, the lack of a mark. You see, poison cases often rely on what's present. Residue, reaction, fingerprints. But sometimes the cleanest things are the dirtiest. I tracked her down in Chicago 3 days later, working under a fake name at a flower shop. When we brought her in, she didn't deny it. Just stared at the table between us and said, "He told my mom it was just business. I made it personal." She didn't raise her voice, didn't cry, just sat there with a kind of peace I've only seen in people who've already made peace with what they did. She pled guilty. Voluntary manslaughter. The prosecution didn't even push for murder. Too clean, too calculated. And Paul's history didn't do him any favors. But what stuck with me wasn't the motive. It was the glass. That silent witness. Because it's not always about what you see. Sometimes, it's what's missing that tells you everything. No smudge. No sip. No second chance. Some people vanish without leaving a trace. Others leave too many. This case? It started with a man who never left at all. Or at least, that's what we thought. His name was Harold Stokes. 67 years old. Widower. Retired civil engineer. Lived alone in a 3-story brownstone in Baltimore. Known for being private, methodical, and intensely routine. Every morning. Same time. Same walk to the bakery down the street. Same coffee, same paper, same chair. The staff even joked you could set your watch by him. Until one Tuesday morning, he didn't show up. No calls. No signs of travel. Mail piling up. After 3 days, a neighbor reported the absence. Police did a wellness check. The front door was locked from the inside, deadbolt secured. No signs of forced entry. All windows shut. They searched all 3 floors. No Harold, no body, no blood, no note, just an empty house. And that's when I was called in. At first glance, it felt like a classic missing person case. Maybe he wandered off. Maybe it was voluntary. But then I walked the property. Harold's cane was still by the front door. His wallet on the kitchen counter. Cell phone and the charger. Jacket hanging on the hook. Everything said he never left. But here's what made my stomach drop. The chairlift on the stairwell. It was pristine, untouched, not a single fingerprint since it was last cleaned the Friday before he vanished. But Harold had a knee replacement. He couldn't do stairs. Every neighbor knew it. Even the bakery staff said he complained about damn stairs all the time. So if he didn't use the lift, he didn't go upstairs. And if he didn't go upstairs, then what the hell was his phone doing charging on the second floor? We checked the security cameras. One over the front door, one in the alley behind the house. Both showed nothing after 9:34 p.m. Monday. That was Harold, returning from his evening walk. After that, the world seemed to swallow him whole. I started mapping his house, measuring every inch, every creak in the floorboards. That's when I noticed something subtle. The dust on the basement stairs, undisturbed, but the overhead light had a fresh bulb, wrong wattage, slightly newer, a 75-watt LED in a fixture meant for 60. The heat marks hadn't even fully settled. That's not something Harold would have done. He was meticulous, the kind of man who labeled his fuses. So who changed that bulb? We popped the cover on the fuse box. Something had been removed, circuit 11, labeled laundry/freezer. The wiring was recent. The insulation looked newer. Someone had opened this box within the last week. Then I looked at the freezer. Locked. Basement corner. Old model with a latch. No signs of damage. But it was padlocked, with a lock not logged in any of Harold's spare key drawers. We had to cut it. Inside, no body, just frozen food. But behind the freezer was a vent, covered by drywall, not sealed properly. You could see the imperfect putty line. We removed the panel, and behind it, a passage, narrow, about 2 feet wide, dusty, but the prints were fresh. It led to a crawl space, and at the end of that space, a hatch. That hatch opened directly into the alley behind the house, hidden behind a false panel in the brick. No one, not neighbors, not even the previous home inspector, had any idea it was there. Whoever installed it had engineering knowledge, which made sense. Harold had designed it himself, built it into the house years ago, probably as a security measure during his more paranoid years. But now, it had been used for something else. We reviewed the back alley footage again, and we found it, 3:12 a.m., Tuesday morning. A man appears, emerging from a shadow that wasn't there a second before. No door, no gate, just appearing mid-frame, because he'd come from that hatch. Same height as Harold, same walk, same posture, but his head covered, face obscured, carrying a bag, not limping, not using a cane, moving too easily, too confidently. We traced the footage forward. The man walked 4 blocks. At 3:23 a.m., he got into a car, rented under the name Edgar Linwood. Fake ID, but we got a plate. The car had been returned 2 days later, cleaned, wiped down, except for one thing, a receipt from a hardware store in Towson. Duct tape, LED bulbs, drywall patch kit, the same supplies used to seal the hidden vent. Turns out, Harold had been dead for at least 48 hours before the disappearance was reported. Body dumped elsewhere. Still hasn't been found. The man in the video wasn't Harold. It was his nephew, Kyle. Harold had taken him in years earlier, helped pay off his debt, gave him a second chance. But Kyle had gambling problems, and he'd recently taken out a second mortgage on a house he didn't own. Kyle needed Harold out of the picture, cleanly, quietly, so he did what most murderers forget to do. He thought ahead. He killed him Monday night, changed a light bulb to cover his late-night movements, placed the body in a rental vehicle, then left through a passage no one else knew existed. Then he staged the scene to look like Harold never left. It almost worked, but the mistake wasn't in the act. It was in the lift. Harold never used the stairs. And Kyle didn't realize that by faking the exit through the front, or even just leaving the phone upstairs, he'd be breaking the one rule Harold never would. We arrested Kyle 3 days later. He confessed, said he thought the house owed him something. But all it owed him was the truth, and that came from a detail no one else noticed. Not the body, not the blood, just the silence of a machine that should have been used, but wasn't.